The palace floated above the bright city like a jewel in the sky. Its walls shone with rainbow colors, and the air around it sparkled with strange lights. Inside, the Empress's baby dragons waited. They were small, but anyone who saw them knew they were dangerous. Their scales shone like metal, their claws were sharp, and their little eyes glowed with mischief. Every alien babysitter who tried to take care of them ran away in fear. Some screamed as they saw the dragons leap across the room. Others tried to stay calm, but a single puff of smoke from a dragon was enough to make them drop all their tools and flee. Even the strongest aliens could not handle the dragon's energy. The Empress had sent her best caretakers, but one by one they had left, shaking and terrified. The dragons did not mean to be cruel. They were just curious and playful in their own way. One dragon tried to grab a floating crystal, knocking over a pile of shiny plates. Another dragon chased its own tail until it slipped and fell on a soft cushion, squeaking loudly. But to the aliens, every sound was a threat. They had never seen creatures like this. Every screech, every flap of tiny wings, made them think the dragons would attack. The Empress paced in her chamber, her long robes flowing behind her. She was beautiful and powerful, with eyes that could command the stars themselves. But even she felt worry. "No one can care for them," she said softly. "Not even the bravest aliens can survive 5 minutes with my hatchlings." Her voice was calm, but behind it was a hint of concern. The dragons were her children, and she wanted them to be safe and happy. She wanted someone who could play with them, laugh with them, and teach them gently, but no one could. In the palace halls, the dragons tumbled and squeaked, their tiny wings fluttering. One dragon crawled along a shiny banister, staring down at a hovering alien servant. The servant froze, his mouth open, eyes wide. The dragon hissed softly, just testing, and the alien screamed. He spun in the air and flew out of the room, bumping into another servant who also fled. The dragons laughed in their own way, a high-pitched chirping that sounded like bells ringing. They did not understand why everyone was afraid. To them this was all a game. One dragon bounced on a cushion, another slid across the floor chasing a bouncing light from a floating crystal. A third dragon puffed smoke into the air, making little rings that floated like tiny clouds. The palace was a chaos of motion and sound, but the dragons were having the best time. The Empress sighed and knelt to watch them from a safe distance. She had expected them to be difficult, but this was more than she imagined. Her little dragons were clever, mischievous, and full of energy. She loved them dearly, but she knew something had to be done. If no one could care for them, who would? Who could survive their noise, their jumps, their sharp claws, and their playful bites? Every day, a new babysitter arrived, hopeful and brave. They wore protective suits and carried strange tools to keep the dragons calm. But each attempt ended the same way. One tried to offer a floating toy, only to have it snatched in midair by a dragon that flew straight at him. Another tried to make the dragons sleep with a soft song, but the dragons only squeaked louder, bouncing from one wall to another. The aliens left exhausted and scared, and the dragons chirped happily, thinking they had won another game. Word spread across the palace. The Empress's baby dragons were untamable. No alien could calm them, no matter how strong or clever. Some whispered that the dragons were dangerous enough to destroy the city if they wished. Others said they were too clever for anyone to teach. The truth was simpler: the dragons were just being themselves. They were playful, curious, and fearless in a world where everyone else was cautious and careful. One dragon, the smallest of the three, crawled toward the door. It sniffed the air and twitched its little wings. The palace was full of shiny things, and the dragon wanted them all. It squeaked happily and darted across the room, knocking over a vase. The vase shattered on the floor, and a hovering servant squeaked in terror before zooming away. The dragons looked at each other, chirped, and then leapt onto a soft rug, rolling and tumbling in a heap of scales and laughter. The Empress watched quietly. She knew the palace would never be calm with them around. She also knew she could not let them be alone forever. They needed care, attention, and someone who could understand them. But who? Every creature she had sent had failed. Every alien had been scared away. The dragons were clever, fast, and fearless, and the palace had begun to feel like a place no one could survive. And yet, as she looked at her hatchlings, she smiled. They were her children. They were full of life and joy. Perhaps someone would come, someone brave and different, someone who could see the dragons not as monsters, but as little beings full of curiosity and laughter. She did not know who it would be, but she hoped. The dragons tumbled and squeaked again, unaware of the worry they caused. In the palace of lights and colors, chaos was king, and laughter, even in the face of fear, was the law of the land. The Empress sighed and whispered softly, One day someone will play with you, my little dragons. One day, you will find a friend who is not afraid. The next morning, the Empress sat in her crystal chamber, watching her baby dragons tumble and play. They were chasing floating lights and rolling on soft rugs, squeaking happily. Even as she smiled at their joy, her worry did not go away. No alien had lasted more than a few minutes. How could anyone care for them? How could anyone teach them or play with them without fear? Her advisors whispered nervously around her. Your Majesty, one said, bowing low, we have tried all the alien caretakers. None can survive their games. They are clever, fast, and fearless. Another added, perhaps we should leave them alone for a while. No one can handle them. The Empress shook her head. They are my children. I cannot leave them alone. They need someone to love them, to laugh with them. Fear will never teach them anything. They need a friend. A quiet voice spoke from the back of the room. It belonged to an advisor from a nearby human colony. Your Majesty, he said carefully, we have humans who are different. They are small, curious, and brave in ways no one else is. Perhaps one of our children could meet the dragons. The Empress raised an eyebrow. A child? Do you mean a human baby? The advisor nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. A human baby girl. She is fearless, kind, and full of laughter. She might see the dragons as friends, not monsters. The Empress considered this. A baby? Could it really work? Could such a tiny human calm her powerful dragons? She had no choice. Every alien had failed. Perhaps it was time to try something new, something no one had tried before. Very well, she said. Bring the child. But she must be watched carefully. I will not risk her life. The human colony agreed. Soon, a small baby girl arrived, carried gently by her parents. She was tiny, barely a year old, with bright eyes full of wonder. She looked around the palace without fear, smiling at the colors and lights. The dragons noticed her immediately. Their glowing eyes followed her every move. One little dragon crawled closer, its claws clicking on the crystal floor. The others joined, wings fluttering, smoke puffing from their tiny noses. The aliens watching from the side held their breath. They were certain the dragons would attack. One small movement, one squeak too loud, and the child could be in danger. But the baby girl did not cry. She did not flinch. She giggled. A soft, happy giggle that sounded like music in the crystal hall. The dragons froze. They tilted their heads, curious. They had never heard such a sound. It was not fear, not panic, not a scream. It was happiness. The smallest dragon crawled closer, its claws out, sniffing the baby's tiny hands. She clapped them together and laughed again. The dragons chirped in response, unsure what to do next. The human baby reached out her tiny hands, touching one of the dragons gently. The little dragon sneezed smoke in surprise, but the baby only laughed harder. The dragons blinked at her, confused. They were used to screaming aliens who ran away. This tiny human did not run. She laughed. She wanted to play. One dragon hopped onto a soft cushion near the baby. She squealed with joy and reached up to touch its shiny scales. The dragon chirped, stepping back carefully. Then it nudged her with its nose and she laughed even louder. The other dragons joined, hopping around, puffing little smoke rings in the air. The palace observers gasped. The dragons were not attacking. They were playing. The human baby girl was fearless. Her laughter spread through the hall like sunlight. It filled the corners and echoed off the crystal walls. The dragons followed her every move, curious and excited. The Empress watched quietly from her window. A small smile spread across her face. Perhaps, she thought, this human child could do what no alien could. She could be the first friend of the dragons, the one who would teach them joy, not fear. The baby girl rolled on the soft rug, holding the tiny dragon's claws in her hands. The dragon squeaked and tried to wiggle free, but the baby only laughed harder. Soon, all three dragons were chasing her giggles, leaping over cushions and sliding across the floor. Smoke rings danced in the air, catching the light from the crystal walls. Even the hovering alien robots stopped moving. They watched amazed. They had expected chaos, terror, and panic. Instead they saw joy. The dragons were not wild monsters. They were playful, curious, and now happy. The human baby girl had done something no one else could. She had made them feel safe, loved, and amused. By the end of the morning, the dragons were curled around the baby girl, resting their heads on soft cushions. She laughed as they nudged her tiny hands. The Empress stepped closer, her eyes warm. "So this is the friend I have been waiting for," she whispered. "Someone who is not afraid. Someone who sees them as they truly are." The palace was quiet now, filled with the soft sounds of laughter and purring dragon noises. The human baby girl had changed everything. The dragons, once feared by the strongest aliens, now giggled and played with her. For the first time the Empress knew they would be safe. They had found someone who could understand them. And as the sun shone through the crystal walls, casting colors across the floor, the Empress smiled. Perhaps humans were small, but they could do what no one else could. Perhaps, in their laughter and bravery, they could bring light even to the most fearsome hearts. The dragons chirped happily, their tiny wings fluttering. The human baby girl laughed, clapping her hands. In that moment, the palace was filled not with fear but with joy, and for the first time, it felt like the dragons had found a friend. The dragons had never met anyone like the human baby girl. She was small, soft, and fearless. She did not run away when they jumped, did not cry when smoke puffed in her face, and most importantly, she laughed. A soft, happy laugh that made the dragons stop in their tracks. At first, the dragons were unsure. They circled her slowly, wings twitching, claws clicking on the crystal floor. The smallest dragon poked her with its tiny nose. The baby girl giggled and reached out to touch it. The dragon froze, surprised. It had never been touched without fear. But she was gentle and her hands were soft. She patted its shiny scales and the dragon chirped. Then she laughed again, clapping her hands. The sound was like music, high and clear, and it echoed around the palace hall. The dragons began to relax. They hopped closer, sniffing her tiny hands and hair. One dragon blew a tiny smoke ring that floated over her head. She looked up and laughed, trying to catch it. The dragons squeaked, curious, and puffed more smoke rings. Soon, all three dragons were playing a game, chasing the baby girl as she crawled across the soft rugs. She squealed with delight, her small hands reaching for their claws and tails. The Empress watched from a distance, her heart full of relief. She had worried for so long about her hatchlings. They had scared every alien who tried to care for them. But this small human child had done what no one else could. She had shown them that not everything was scary. That some creatures could be kind, gentle, and playful. The dragons were learning to trust her, and in return they were teaching her their games. One dragon, the largest of the three, tried to climb onto a floating cushion. It wobbled and fell with a small squeak. The baby girl reached out and grabbed its claw, steadying it. The dragon blinked, unsure at first, and then nudged her hand gently with its nose. She laughed and patted it again. This simple moment, small as it was, marked a turning point. The dragons were starting to understand friendship, something they had never experienced. The baby girl noticed the smallest dragon hiding behind a crystal column. She crawled slowly toward it, humming softly. The dragon peeked out, then jumped back, afraid. But she did not chase it. Instead, she sat quietly, smiling and waving. Slowly, the dragon crept closer. It sniffed her hand, then pressed its tiny head against her shoulder. The baby girl clapped her hands and laughed, and the dragon chirped in reply. The other dragons watched, tilting their heads curiously. Soon, the dragons were chasing her in playful circles. They leapt onto cushions, slid across the polished floors, and blew smoke rings that floated above her head. She laughed at every jump, squealing when one dragon landed too close or when smoke tickled her cheeks. The dragon's sharp claws never hurt her. She knew how to move gently, and they learned to control their play. It was a dance of trust, each learning from the other. Even the palace guards and hovering robots stopped their usual routines. They watched in amazement. The dragons, which had terrified the strongest aliens, were now gentle and careful around the tiny human. The child's laughter had transformed them. She had not shouted, yelled, or demanded control. She had simply been herself, fearless, kind, and joyful. And the dragons responded. The Empress stepped closer, her eyes soft. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps humans are small, but they are brave in ways no one else can be. They can reach hearts that others cannot." She smiled as the dragons rolled onto their backs, nudging the baby girl with their heads. She giggled and patted them, squealing when one nuzzled her cheek. The dragons chirped happily, wings fluttering, smoke puffing in small clouds. The largest dragon picked up a floating crystal, balancing it on its claws. The baby girl reached for it, laughing as the crystal wobbled in the air. One by one, the dragons began to teach her their games. They were clever and fast, but she learned quickly. She crawled, rolled, and reached out to touch them, laughing whenever a dragon squeaked or jumped. Their fearsome nature faded, replaced by curiosity and trust. By the end of the day, the palace hall was filled with laughter and gentle chirps. The baby girl lay on a soft rug, and the dragons curled around her like fluffy pillows. They had stopped chasing everything and everyone in the hall. Now they were focused only on her. The palace, once a place of chaos and fear, was filled with warmth and happiness. The Empress knelt by the window watching them. "They have found a friend," she said softly. "A friend who does not fear them. A friend who sees joy where others see danger. Perhaps this is the beginning of something new." The baby girl patted the dragons' heads and they nuzzled her back. She giggled, reaching for their tails and wings. The dragons responded, gentle and playful. The Empress knew this moment would be remembered. No alien could have done what she had done. The human child had transformed fear into trust, danger into joy. And the dragons had changed too. They had learned the first lessons of friendship, all from a tiny, fearless human girl. As the sun set, casting golden light through the crystal walls, the dragons settled down, heads resting near the baby girl. She yawned and snuggled between them. The Empress smiled, feeling a peace she had never known in the palace before. The dragons were still playful, still clever, but they were no longer untouchable. They had found someone who understood them. Someone who could make them laugh. For the first time, the Empress saw that perhaps humans, small and simple as they seemed, held a power stronger than fear. They held joy, trust, and courage, the kind that could even tame the most fearsome of dragons. And in that glowing palace, with crystal walls reflecting the colors of the sky, the dragons chirped softly, and the human baby girl giggled. For the first time, everyone knew that friendship, even the smallest kind, could change everything. The next morning, the palace was alive with laughter and tiny squeaks. The human baby girl was already awake, her bright eyes sparkling with excitement. She crawled across the soft crystal floor, reaching for the dragons who were tumbling around her. The dragons chirped and squeaked, chasing her little hands and puffing tiny clouds of smoke in delight. The largest dragon leapt onto a floating cushion, trying to show off. The baby girl clapped her hands and squealed with joy. She crawled toward him, patting his shiny scales. The dragon puffed smoke in surprise, but when she laughed, it blinked and nudged her gently with its nose. The dragons were learning to play with her, not just around her. One of the smaller dragons crawled behind a crystal column, watching the baby girl carefully. She noticed it immediately and smiled. Slowly she crawled toward it, humming softly. The dragon hesitated but then leaned forward, letting her touch its head. She giggled as it tickled her fingers with its claws. Soon, the smallest dragon was rolling on the floor, chasing her tiny hands and squeaking happily. The middle dragon, who loved shiny things, picked up a floating crystal and tried to hide it from the baby girl. She crawled quickly, laughing, and reached for it. The dragon squeaked in surprise, then dropped the crystal at her feet. She clapped her hands, her laughter ringing through the palace. The other dragons tilted their heads, curious. They had never seen anyone handle their game so well. The palace hall was filled with chaos, but it was a joyful chaos. Cushions flew in the air, floating crystals spun slowly, and smoke rings danced above everyone's heads. Yet there was no fear, no screams, only laughter and playful squeaks. The dragons chased the baby girl gently, testing her reactions, while she laughed and squealed, crawling and rolling to dodge them. Even the hovering alien robots, who had once panicked at the sight of the dragons, stopped to watch. They had expected screaming, panic, and disaster. Instead, they saw friendship and joy. The dragons were no longer dangerous monsters. They were playful creatures learning to trust a tiny human girl. Her laughter had become their guide. The Empress watched quietly from her chamber, her heart warming. Her little dragons, once feared by the bravest aliens, were now gentle and playful around this small human child. She could not stop smiling. "Perhaps humans are small," she whispered, "but they can reach hearts no one else can." She watched as the baby girl rolled onto her back, patting the dragons' heads. The dragons chirped, nudging her hands and wings, learning the rhythm of her games. The dragons began to invent new games. One dragon balanced a floating crystal on its claws and nudged it toward the baby girl. She crawled after it, trying to grab it. Another dragon puffed smoke rings in the air, and she laughed as she tried to catch them. The dragons squeaked in delight, circling her, leaping onto cushions and racing across the floor. The palace, once full of fear and chaos, now echoed with laughter and joy. At one point, the largest dragon tried to sneeze a large smoke ring over the baby girl. She giggled and waved her tiny hands, and the dragon chirped, retreating slightly. The dragons learned quickly that she was not afraid. She laughed at their antics, and her joy encouraged them to play without harming her. Every puff of smoke, every leap, every squeak became a game for them to enjoy together. The smallest dragon climbed onto a crystal pedestal, then leapt onto the floor with a small squeak. The baby girl rolled onto her side and reached for it, grabbing its tail gently. The dragon paused, then nudged her hand with its nose. She laughed, clapping her hands. The other dragons watched carefully, tilting their heads. They were learning from her. Her laughter and gentle touch taught them how to be playful without being scary. By mid-afternoon, the palace hall was a whirlwind of laughter, smoke rings and rolling dragons. The baby girl crawled through the middle of it all, squealing with delight. She reached for the dragons' heads, touched their claws and laughed as they nudged her with their noses. The Empress watched, feeling a deep sense of peace. Her dragons, feared by the galaxy, were learning friendship and trust. And it had all begun with a tiny human baby. The dragons curled around her as she lay on a soft rug, wings fluttering, tiny claws tapping gently. She patted them, giggling as they chirped softly. The palace, once a place of chaos and fear, now felt warm and safe. The human baby girl had tamed their hearts with laughter, trust, and courage. The Empress smiled, knowing that no alien could have done what she had done. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the crystal walls, the baby girl yawned and nestled between the dragons. They wrapped around her, small wings shielding her like a protective blanket. Their squeaks became soft, happy murmurs. The palace was quiet, filled only with gentle breathing and soft laughter. For the first time, the Empress saw clearly what she had hoped for. Humans, small as they were, carried a strength unlike any other. Their joy, fearlessness, and gentle courage could change even the most fearsome hearts. The dragons, once untouchable and terrifying, had learned to laugh, play, and trust, all because of a tiny human baby girl. And in that glowing palace, with crystals reflecting the colors of the sky, the dragons chirped softly and the baby girl giggled. Together they created a world of joy, trust, and friendship, proving that even the smallest creatures could make the biggest difference. The next morning, the palace was calm in a way it had never been before. The dragons, once wild and untouchable, were now playful but gentle. Their tiny claws no longer caused panic, and their squeaks were full of joy, not fear. The human baby girl had become their center, their guide, their friend. She crawled across the soft crystal floor, laughing as the dragons followed. The smallest dragon nudged her gently with its nose and she giggled, patting its head. The middle dragon rolled on a cushion, trying to grab a floating crystal, and the baby girl squealed as she reached for it. The largest dragon hopped beside her, watching her every movement carefully. The palace, once filled with chaos, was now full of harmony. The Empress stepped into the hall, her eyes soft and warm. She watched as her dragons played with the human baby girl. No alien had ever managed this. No tool, no game, no trick could make them trust anyone before. And yet, here she was, a tiny human, surrounded by dragons, laughing and squealing in pure delight. The Empress could not stop smiling. "You have done what no one else could," she whispered to herself. "You have shown them trust and joy." She watched as the dragons curled around the baby girl, resting their tiny heads on her soft shoulders. She patted them and they chirped in response, wings fluttering gently. It was a scene of peace, happiness, and love, a sight the Empress had dreamed of but never imagined she would see. The dragons had learned the meaning of friendship. They chased, tumbled, and played, but always with care. The baby girl laughed at every little squeak, every tiny puff of smoke, every playful leap. The dragons mirrored her joy, repeating her laughter in their own way. The palace hall rang with happiness instead of fear, light instead of chaos. At one point, the largest dragon picked up a floating crystal and nudged it toward her. She crawled quickly, laughing, and touched it. The dragon tilted its head, fascinated by her courage and joy. It was a simple game, but in it, the bond between them grew stronger. The dragons had learned patience, gentleness, and care. And the baby girl had shown them that even the smallest creature could inspire courage and happiness. The Empress called her advisors closer. "See," she said softly. "No alien, no matter how strong, could have done this. But a human child, small, gentle, fearless, has tamed hearts no one else could reach. Perhaps humans are meant for something greater than we ever imagined." Her advisors nodded, awed by the scene before them. As the day passed, the dragons became more playful and confident around the baby girl. They rolled on the floor, balanced floating crystals on their claws, and puffed smoke rings for her to chase. She laughed with every move, squealing as they jumped over her or nudged her tiny hands. Their games were full of joy, and the Empress knew they had learned the greatest lesson of all: trust and friendship. The palace staff, once terrified of the dragons, now watched in amazement. The hovering robots stopped spinning, the alien servants peeked from the corners, and everyone marveled at the sight of 3 dragons completely captivated by a human baby girl. The Empress smiled. She had never seen the dragons so calm, so happy, so gentle. And it was all because of one tiny human's laughter and bravery. As evening fell, the palace hall glowed in the colors of the sunset. The dragons curled around the baby girl, wings folded, tails gently wrapped around cushions. She yawned and nestled between them, her small hands patting their heads. They chirped softly in return, their glowing eyes watching her protectively. For the first time the palace felt safe, warm and full of love. The Empress knelt beside them, whispering softly, "You have found a friend, my little dragons? Someone who sees your hearts, not your claws. Someone who can make you laugh, play and feel joy." She smiled as the dragons shifted gently, settling around the baby girl like tiny guardians. They had changed completely. Their fearsome nature had softened, replaced by trust, friendship and laughter. Word of the human baby girl spread quickly through the palace and beyond. Aliens who had once feared the dragons now whispered about the tiny human who could make them laugh. Some came to watch, curious and careful. But no one dared approach while the dragons were with her. They had learned that she was their friend, and their loyalty belonged to her alone. As night fell, the palace became quiet. The dragons curled around the baby girl on soft cushions, their small wings protecting her. She slept peacefully between them, dreaming as they softly chirped and breathed beside her. The Empress watched from above, her heart full. She knew this moment would be remembered for generations. A tiny human had tamed the fiercest dragons in the galaxy. And in that glowing palace, with crystal walls reflecting the starlight, the human baby girl, small and fearless, had done what no one else could. She had brought laughter to the dragons, trust to the palace, and hope to the Empress. The dragons, once untouchable and terrifying, now had a friend who could make them giggle, play and feel safe. For the first time, everyone understood. Even the smallest humans could change the biggest hearts. And as the stars shone over the palace, the dragons chirped softly, wings folded, and the baby girl slept peacefully between them. Together they had created a legend of trust, courage and friendship. A story the galaxy would never forget.